Hello, my name is Dr. Ois Guillaume. I'm here to present the speaker for this afternoon. I hope you can hear me um, where you are. You are welcome this afternoon in the second session. We have with us Dr. Esfandiar, Dr. Esfandiar Haghverdi. I hope I say your name correctly.
You did?
I'm sorry if I'm mistaken your name. Okay, great. Okay, great. Um, to the topic for this afternoon will be cybersecurity in the age of global mistrust. Cybersecurity in the age of global mistrust. I know you all know a little bit about cybersecurity with COVID-19, with a lot of spams, with a lot of people stealing account, a lot of things like that. So some of you probably know a little bit, but we have an expert with us this afternoon, Dr. Esfandiar, who is a professor of computer science and director of cybersecurity and global policy program at Lodi School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering from Indiana University, Bloomington. Dr. Esfandiar is Executive Associate Dean of Undergraduate Education and Director of Cybersecurity and Global Policy Program. He is a professor of computer science and adjunct professor of mathematics and joined the School of Informatics in 2002. Very impressive. Only 2 years after the founding of the school at Indiana University, he has taught a variety of courses from proof theory to model theory to information theory and mathematics of finance, and his primary teaching interests are in logic, discrete mathematics, and math, foundation of cryptography. Dr. Esfandiar also is a two-time recipient of IU Trustee Teaching Award, and he has received his bachelor and master degree from electrical and electronic engineering from Asatep University of Middle East Technical University in Turkey, respectively. This was followed by a PhD in mathematics from the University of Ottawa in Canada. He also spent 2 years as a postdoctoral fellow lecturer in the Department of Mathematics, University of Pennsylvania, before joining IU in 2002. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Dr. Esfandiar this afternoon. Your presenter is Dr. Ois Guillaume. I am a professor of business and economics at Georgia Island College. And also I'm here not only to present this great scholar, this great speaker who's going to share with us everything we're supposed to know about the cybersecurity in the age in the era we live in now. And we have with us Dr. Esfandiar. Dr. Esfandiar, welcome to the platform.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. And that was a wonderful, wonderful introduction. Thank you very much, Dr. Guillaume. As my friends say, from this point on, it can only go downhill after such a great introduction, but I will do my best. I promise there will not be any mathematics anywhere to be found on any of the slides, unless you purposely dig deep to find the mathematics, which is fascinating, but this is not a topic for today. So I will start by sharing my slides, and please let me know if they are not advancing. Generally, you will be able to view them fine, but oftentimes I find that there is a problem with advancing the slides. So, okay. So hopefully everybody sees this first slide. And as Dr. Guillaume said, my name is Esfandiar Haghverdi, and I'm with the Lodi School of Informatics, Computing, and Engineering at Indiana, where I joined in 2002. So I've been there for 20 years now. Not always in the same role, not always with the same responsibilities. But currently I am dealing with all the undergraduate programs in our school that basically is like 4 departmental undergraduate programs, and 2 non-departmental independent undergraduate programs. In addition, one of those programs is Cybersecurity and Global Policy that started in year 2020. The first group of students arrived in that same year, and we have been able to grow that program quite significantly, I think, not as well as we had hoped, but I think that much better than it could have been. So today, though, I would like to talk to you about essentially 2 areas of security or cybersecurity. When one thinks about security, generally it falls into 2 categories of system security, so to speak, or software security or network security. They all really gather under one heading of the system security, and then the other side is cryptography. So we will just talk both about cryptography and the system security. Then we will look at the data breach investigations report that annually is published by Verizon to get some sense of what kind of vulnerabilities are constantly being exploited and what the landscape is like in that world. International trade is just a topic that I wanted to add for the business sake. And this really is more relevant to people who are in the international business, companies who operate in that world and who need to be cognizant about issues that come up due to cybersecurity problems or risks or factors or geopolitical issues. And then AI and cybersecurity is a topic that not only for research, but also for teaching and education. This is one of the main topics of the future, is already here, but like in the first 3 to 5 years, I think that it is going to explode. And finally, if we have time, and if not, we can just postpone it for the discussion part or Q&A part, the programs that we have at Indiana University Bloomington, and I would like to talk a little bit about those just to share our experience. So these I had sent to Raj to be shared for those who were interested. I obviously didn't use everything in these books. But in terms of recommendation, I think Computer Security is a nice book, more on the technical side with lots of jargon, but it does a good job of explaining it from scratch. The other 2, in particular, Cybersecurity and Cyber War, is really what we teach basically in the first year of the Cybersecurity Global Policy Program. If you read the subtitle, it says what everyone needs to know. And essentially, I agree with most of what they think that everyone should know. And they are omitting some pieces, but whatever they have included, I think is really good for everyone to have some knowledge about. And cyber warfare is more or less the same category as the previous book, but a little bit more advanced. So in every area that you look, it's always a good thing to ask, what are the central problems of this area? What are the practitioners or theoreticians in this field try to do? And the central problems of, I would say, system security, perhaps would be a better name, are just to determine what kind of assets need protection. Okay, what kind of things need protection? What are the threats that they need this protection against? And how do you want to basically protect them against those threats? Or how do you want to counter those threats? And that really applies in everyday life, right? I mean, if you think about the security of your home, you have jewelry, you have your car, you have your watch, you have your, electronic gadgets. So these are the assets that need protection. What kind of threat are there? Well, maybe if you have a little baby is a threat, right? Because baby may grab your cell phone and bang it on the countertop, and it will be shattered into pieces. So that will be a threat. Now, how do you prevent that from happening? You don't make your cell phone available to your 1-year-old or place it in a place that she cannot reach. So the same mentality applies to computer security or any type of security for that matter. So I just wanted, you will be hearing, and I'm sure many of you have heard the CIA triad, and I didn't want to do without this definition of official National Institute of Standards and Technology definition of computer security, which essentially says all the measures that you want to put in place that will protect against the vulnerabilities in the areas of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all the information system assets. Now, we're not talking about then cars and phones. We're talking about information system assets, in this case, your hardware, software, firmware, any data that you're using, any data that you're storing on those devices, and so on. And what is meant by confidentiality is really the things that nobody can see without proper authorization. So unauthorized access is prohibited. So that is to preserve confidentiality. Integrity, that can be system integrity or data integrity, is that you want to preserve the data, the correctness, the accuracy, the integrity of data. So nobody should be allowed in an unauthorized way to manipulate and change the data or change the specifications of the system. Go and, for example, turn off your PC's firewall. Right? And availability is that you want it to be available, your data, your system, your software, your programs, your website as a business, to be available for service. So that is the confidentiality, integrity, availability, the CIA triad. And more recently, people have added authenticity and accountability. Essentially, you want to make sure that the user who says, I am Esfandiar Haghverdi, I want to log on this locale or a website, is really Esfandiar Haghverdi. Or if something happened, I can trace it back to him or whoever is responsible for doing that, which itself is a very, very complicated problem, but very desirable property. So just to give you an example, whenever any of these three things gets violated, and more than one can get violated, but let's just focus on one, there will be an impact of that breach. There will be an impact of that incident. And usually in literature, they are classified as low, high, moderate. And I give you just one example. For example, if there is a nurse, there's an inside threat to a hospital, and for whatever reason, the nurse goes and changes the allergy information on the patients, then that data of allergy of the patient has been changed in an unauthorized way, and therefore the integrity of that data is lost or violated. That will have an impact, and that certainly impact can go all the way to, God forbid, the death of the patient, because you wouldn't know that information when it pops up, and you think that it's okay to put this penicillin in the bloodstream, and then you kill the patient. So that will be categorized as a high impact violation. And this diagram, I think, that very nicely summarizes the attackers or the offenders versus the owners or the defenders in this ping pong game that they continually play. And what you see here is that the threat agents create threats, okay, because they wish to damage or abuse the assets that are owned by the owner. So therefore, they give rise by those actions, by those intentions, threats to the assets, and they increase the risk of protecting these assets for the owner. And owner, of course, values these assets and, of course, continuously tries to minimize the risk, okay, wishes to minimize the risk, and does so by providing countermeasures to reduce the risk that the attackers or the threat actors or agents are creating for those assets. So, for example, you put your car in the garage, right? I mean, that is one way of countermeasuring if your area or neighborhood is particularly prone to threat agents who may be people who break into the cars or steal items from the cars or steal the car itself. So one countermeasure to reduce that risk would be to put it in an enclosed place. At least to some degree, it will prevent it. And here is my last piece that I would like to talk to you about, which you will commonly hear or see, and it is called the threat matrix. What you do here is generally when people want to analyze, or for your business you want to analyze, or for your class, or for your house, or for your life, you want to analyze the type of threats that you're encountering, you basically look at all the assets in the rows. So every row has the column, has the indicator or a label of an asset that needs to be protected. In this case, for information systems, hardware, software, data, communication links, and networks, and all that, and the types of threats that you are trying to protect against. For example, availability, confidentiality, and integrity. And then you go and do the analysis of what can happen that, for example, will jeopardize the confidentiality of the data. So in the matrix, you go to the row data and column confidentiality, and you see, for example, an authorized read performed of this data, and for example, you send the data about your institution, about the number of students in certain category that may be so few that a clever statistical analysis may reveal actually the identity of those students. So that will be somebody learning about something they are not authorized to learn. And that is done because of the small pool of the people that you said are in this category. And you send it to someone, not suspecting that something can be found out from that. So there are things, therefore, you complete your matrix for your situation, and then you go with that in order to see how now you're going to protect against it by creating a security strategy. And what the security strategy components are specification, sometimes called policy, implementation, and correctness. Essentially, you're saying, okay, so I know these are the things I have to protect against. These are the things that are my valuable assets. And here is what I'm going to do to protect them. Okay, so tell us what you're going to do. That's the specification. What are you trying to do? How are you going to protect these assets against those vulnerabilities? How are you going to implement that? Okay, how does it actually work to provide? If you said, I want to protect my car, okay, how are you going to do that? I'm going to put a cover on it. Well, then correctness asks, or assurance question says, does it really work? No, because if you put a cover, a fabric cover on your car, can't I just pull the cover up and break the window and take your purse out of the car? So it's not working. So this part is the security strategy. What kind of a strategy do you put, and how can you answer these questions that you need to answer? So for the specification or the policy part, you need to look at the values of your assets and what are the values of your assets, what are the valuable assets that needs protection, what are the, so basically that matrix, you have to complete that. And then one thing that doesn't go into that matrix is how do you balance it out? Because it should be ease of use versus security. It should be cost of it versus. So if you had to protect your car by building an iron cast garage that has no entries, no glasses, it's solid steel everywhere, it may cost 2 or 3 times the cost of your car, right? So maybe even if your car is stolen, maybe it's a better idea if that's the only way that you're going to protect your car, because you can buy 3 more cars with that money. So that doesn't really work. Or that you put 10 different locks on your car. Is it really easy then in the morning when you get to your car, you have to unlock 10 different locks in order to get to your car? So you have to balance out all these strategies the way that you see them against the users. Can users be happy or relatively happy? Will they complain all the time about security measures? Because then it won't work. For the implementation, you need to answer the questions that how does it work? It needs to primarily try to prevent any kind of attack, any kind of exploitation. Well, if you fall short of that, it should be able to at least detect if there is an attack on your system. And if it does so, it needs to be able to respond in a proper way. And even if all of those are done properly and you cannot recover, you're in trouble. So after the response, proper reporting and all that stuff, you need to be able to get back to your system, turn on your computer and be able to work in a reasonable amount of time. Or your data center, or your business, or your website for your commodities that you sell, say, online. All of that should be able to come back in a reasonable time. So your policy shouldn't be something that if something went wrong, then the only way to stand the business back up can happen in very costly way after 6 months. Okay, even if it is a perfect protection, nobody will care, nobody will buy that protection. And finally, of course, you have to provide the proof that this actually works. And then there are lots of different ways to evaluate your corrective system or your protection or your strategies correctness, and to issue that assurance to the users. And there are lots of different ways, but that will take us too far from our current discussion. So that essentially, and I will go back to a little bit more details on the system security side, but that's basically the fundamental question that system security people always ask and still are asking and trying to answer. When you go to the world of cryptography, which is the other side of the coin, if you like, there, the basic idea that goes back, God knows, to the beginning of humanity even, is that you want to have secure and private communication over public or insecure channels. That's the question. How can I have private secure communication over insecure channels? Well, the answer even to the people 5,000 to 6,000 years ago appear to be very clear. You have to hide the things you're communicating so that people cannot find out. And that is exactly what they did. So there is all the enciphering or encryption ideas, they all come from here. A very simple one, again, we don't have, and the promise was made, no mathematics, and we don't have time to get into the details. But the Caesar cipher, which is attributed to Julius Caesar, is that he used to communicate with his generals through the couriers that will take the information without knowing what it said, by shifting every letter 3 places downwards. So the letter A will be D, the letter B will be E, you know. So instead of A, B, you will see D, E, and the person, the general who receives it, will go back 3 places and will find out what you said. And that's still in use, I mean, but it's used in kindergarten or maybe elementary school when kids want to, you know, trick their teacher and talk to each other or other classmates. There are much more advanced versions of that called polyalphabetic things. They are even polygraphic things that replace blocks of letters by blocks of letters. But none of that technical thing matters now. The idea was, can I hide my message in a way that it wouldn't be that easy to find what I am saying to my partner? So therefore, my partner and I, we can communicate even publicly on the phone, but through this encryption. And even if somebody grabs our message, they won't be able to understand what we said. So there were though problems with that, because if you want to do that, if I'm Julius Caesar and I'm sending you a message and you're one of the generals, you better know that I went forward 3 places. Because if you don't know what I've done, how will you be able to get back what I said? So we needed to somehow agree on that number 3. And how are we going to agree on number 3? Am I going to send it to you? Well, then I need encryption for number 3. But how I'm going to encrypt number 3, it needs another encryption. But then for that, you need another key. But how am I sending that key to you? Maybe we should encrypt that key, but we will keep doing it for infinity. I mean, it never works then that way. So people usually, like you see in spy movies, you know, they meet in a park or in a dark place, and then they exchange a newspaper, and they put that number 3 somewhere in the ads of the new newspaper. So you take the newspaper, you know that the code is 3, and then you go and wait for the messages. So later on, in intelligence agencies in Britain in particular, they were asking questions like, can we share this secret, this number 3, without actually meeting in person and exchanging newspapers over an insecure channel? Can we just call each other and say it somehow, establish that the code is 3? Or can we even communicate securely without a shared secret between us?
More than is adequate, especially in the face of scarcity, for the majority to be temperate or brutally. Bench up, pension. I recently stumbled on a letter dated 17th day of October 2019, purportedly written by former governor of Zamfara State.
No. Yes, I thought that was a question, so that's why I paused. So that led to the creation of this. It was a very counterintuitive idea that you could actually communicate a secret like that over an insecure channel without us sharing anything in common. So it was like kind of almost unbelievable that this can happen, but it did happen previously in a secret way, unpublished way, in a classified way, in the sort of NSA of UK. And then it was invented and published by Diffie-Hellman in 1976. So if you have heard about RSA, RSA is an answer to the second question over here: can we communicate securely over insecure channels without sharing a secret? No number 3. How can we communicate in private? So that is and digital signatures is a continuation of that machinery. So it's very heavy mathematics, but very interesting mathematics. But basically the beauty of it is that it solved that very counterintuitive question of how can one communicate like that. And if you just one word about how is it then that can you in fact break it? Is it possible to break and to find somebody's RSA encoded credit card purchase through Amazon and then find their credit card number? Theoretically it is, and theoretically it's very easy. It basically boils down to saying, if I give you number 15, can you tell me what prime numbers multiply for me to get 15? And you may think a little bit and you say, 3 and 5. 3 and 5 multiply to get 15. So essentially this is the problem. If I give you 15, can you give me 3 and 5? But when you deal with huge numbers, very big numbers, that problem becomes very difficult computationally. So if you have a computer, even if you have a supercomputer even, it may take you years to actually give me the answer on big numbers. So that's, and I put some references there in your leisure time if you're interested. I'm not going to click on any of those references there. And that leads basically to this very fashionable thing that you may hear about called post-quantum cryptography, which is really the ideas that, because you may know quantum computers can do what I just described in a very short period of time. In a very short period of time. So if I have a quantum computer and you do purchase things on Amazon, which uses RSA encryption, I will be able to steal all your credit card information. So people are trying to find ways of doing the same thing. Now, of course, don't use that prime numbers again, or that kind of a problem, because I can break it with my quantum computer. Are there things that we can do that you can't break with your quantum computer? And that's the whole area of post-quantum cryptography. And that's all I want to say about that. So going back quickly to system security, again, these are the things that one needs to be extremely careful about. You keep hearing about malware, ransomware, this and that. And again, the basic definition is the piece of malicious software that basically violates or compromises one of those CIA elements or more than CIA element in your data, applications, or your system. So they find a way of infecting your system, right? Then they need to find a way to access the information that they want to steal. This is of interest to them. And then they want to, of course, in many cases, remain hidden so that in the future, they can also steal some more information as you update your information or many other things come up. And they want to spread themselves over the networks and go find other victims as well. So that is essentially what the malware tries to do. And people generally, therefore, classify them in categories like, do they need any programs for their work and for spreading and infecting others? And if yes, they are viruses. Are they self-contained programs that they don't need anything in order to spread themselves over networks or other computers? Then they are worms or Trojans or bots. You might have heard these phrases. And the other category is, do they operate by replication or not? And if they do operate by replication, they are in the category of viruses and worms. If they don't replicate necessarily, then they are Trojans and spam email, for example. And just a word about Trojans are malicious software that look legitimate. You look at it, it looks perfectly fine. It is a piece of document that was sent by your friend, very close friend. It is related to what you were just discussing the night before. And then she's just asking you to confirm what you said last night. And press there to send me this picture you were talking about. And you press and your system gets infected. So that, or it is an update of an operating system that you download, but in fact, it is hiding malicious code inside it. And again, you might have heard in news or other places, payload of the malicious code, which is what the action is, where the action takes place. What happens if the malicious software gets into your system, infects your system? What does it do? And the thing it does is called the payload. It delivers the payload. So it may corrupt your files. It may encrypt your system and ask for Bitcoin to give you the key to decrypt that. It may steal your information. It may steal your password. It may steal other information, bank account, credentials, name, username, password, all of that. Or it may make you a zombie. It may make your computer steal your whole system and use it as part of an army that then is used with millions of other computers like yours to attack, say, Visa or MasterCard. Right? And these are the things that have happened without your knowledge. You don't even know that you're part of that army of attackers. And more recently, people have started actually, which is really a strange thing, but people have started offering crimeware and malicious software as service. So there are now places that sell you the toolkits for crimeware. You go and buy or buy certain features of it. They even have customer services and things like that. You want to attack something, you want to steal something. And then you can call them, say, hey, this doesn't work. This part of it didn't work. I couldn't steal this password. and things like that. So one of the most famous one was Zeus crimeware toolkit. And again, you can read about that. You can, if you're interested. And the other that you hear in news, and you have been hearing, I'm sure all of us do, is the APTs, which is the Advanced Persistent Threats. These are not really around the neighborhood or, this amateur hacker doing something with the system. These are generally Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, like these are the nation states who are doing something very advanced, and that's the word advanced, very persistent, that it goes through lots of research, continuous monitoring of your systems, continuous presence on your systems, maybe for years, that you had no idea about in your IoT home network, just collecting information, or in your business, just collecting information without doing anything whatsoever. And all of a sudden does what it does. But these are mostly handled by nation states. So the most famous one, APT1, is the Chinese cyber espionage group. There are many of these APT numbers, but the Russian ones. Stuxnet is rumored to be a US-Israeli product against Iranian nuclear centrifuges, was another APT. It stayed in the system and monitored it for many months before actually spitting them out of normal. And I debated whether I want to put this one slide here for the just the fear that we won't have enough time. But I thought it would be worth to at least mention, not everybody knows, not everybody pays attention to this detail of how this came to be. This terminology is actually due to Fred Cohen. He coined this term of computer virus back in the 80s, and he wrote his thesis on computer viruses. His PhD thesis is on computer viruses, and you can find it online if you're interested. You can just Google it and find it. But this is a type of thing that needs another program. It needs another program. It attaches itself, just like in real life, COVID attaches itself to you, and then you infect somebody else. But if you're not there as a human being, and we are just talking, let's say, about human beings, no animals, then COVID virus is useless, because COVID virus, what is it going to do? You need to be there to carry this, be the host, and COVID virus needs you in order to infect other people. So it's the same for the computer virus. And the first virus known in 86 is the brain virus. Again, some Pakistani researchers who didn't intend actually to do this, but they ended up infecting lots of systems. Back then, MS-DOS, disk operating system, before Windows was even a thing, just for historical references. So maybe a few words about who these people are. How do we categorize the threat agents or the threat actors? Obviously, cyber criminals. So these are the people mostly with almost exclusively financial reward. That is what they want. They just want money, nothing else. Then there are activists, or so-called hacktivists, who have some political social agenda or cause, and they are finding that cause as a right cause, and therefore they are fighting for that, they are hacking for that. Some of them are currently very much active, attacking Russian computer systems in the fight against Russia in support of Ukraine. So that will be a hacktivist approach. And some of these groups that I mentioned here, the most famous one, Anonymous and LulzSec, were the ones that were very active in the Arab Spring, in the Tunisian revolution, in Egypt uprisings and things like that. They helped a lot in trying to unlock the systems and trying to carry people to other social networks when government was banning one versus the other. Or maybe individuals even, not just groups. Chelsea Mannings, Edward Snowden, these are even activists who operated as an individual. You may have these state nations, and state nation sponsored organizations that work for the state, but state, of course, will deny any connection with them, but they basically are supported. All the resources come from the state for them to attack certain countries and do certain malfeasance. And then there are others who have maybe things just to impress their girlfriends or boyfriends, or just to show them how clever they are, how smart they are, how they can break your phone and find your password. You know, that is the reason for many actually people doing this kind of thing. And there is also a classification, and you may hear this in the news and other places, on the skill levels. Very often the term is used as script kiddies. So script kiddies are really hackers with the smallest amount of knowledge about the technological things. That is, they just take a ready-made off-the-shelf tool and they don't know what to play with or what to do with it, but they just know how to use it roughly properly, and then they do that. That's it. You say, download this software and click here to take part in this denial of service attack against MasterCard. They do that. Then there is the journeyman, where they have the skills and they may actually go and modify what they get off the shelf. They may change some lines of the code and maybe repurpose it a little bit to do something more or less or different. And then there are master hackers, who are the people who actually write that code. They can write their own exploit and they can write their own sort of command and control and otherwise. So they are like the top of the line. So I am not sure how much time we will have. We have like roughly 10 minutes left, but I will do my best to get us to maybe up to AI. And then if we have time, we can go to the rest of the slides. But I will be sharing the slides with Raj and with Riza, and you're more than welcome to just have a look and read and ask me any questions you ever want to ask about anything there that I said or any references thereof. But let's look at Verizon's data breach investigations report. And it is important to notice that what they call an incident is just any compromise, any event that compromises one of those CIA triad things. And what they call a breach is an incident that has been confirmed, that there is actually a data loss or a data disclosure. Like with what happened with Target a few years ago was a breach, right? What happened with some other companies, it was a breach. It was actually known that data was leaked. So this is 21, which is for year 2020. So I will skip that. I put it for your reference there. This is 22, just published, but this is for year 21. And it shows that basically there are these pathways, and just the three of them that are the most important ones that will hurt you. Credentials. So people will come and steal your password, steal your username, steal something else about you. That is part of your credentials. Or there will be phishing, right? There will be phishing attack on you, and you will get some email, and you will be clicking on some part of that to get infected. And then there will be some exploit of a vulnerability that you don't really play a role in. But you see how like almost 50% is stolen credentials. This one shows the ransomware, and as you can see, ransomware has been on the rise. Look how little it was back even in 2017-18, and look how far it has come, right? For a total of 25% increase since 2017, and only 13% just in 1 year. The total of 25%, but half of that, 13% roughly, was the increase only from 2020 to 21. So ransomware is on the rise, okay? You can rest assured that that is on the rise, and it will continue, especially targeting hospitals. This shows how vulnerable you can be to supply chain, okay? You have a friend who does something for you, right? You have a company that brings you your stuff, your food. You have somebody else who creates your security system. All these supply chain, they are
with the manager.
Here and see that. So 62% of intrusions incidents were supply chain incidents. Okay, so that again, huge number, and shows how much we rely. SolarWinds is perfect example. This is a good news, I suppose, is that mistakes, errors in configurations are kind of from this point to this point, from 2020 to 21, like steady and went down. So that's a good thing. It has been going down since 2019. So people are making fewer and fewer errors in configuring, in particular, cloud storage. Okay, so these are cloud configurations, and the mistakes in there that you can like leave all your photos of your vacation on the Apple cloud vulnerable, and I can just go download all of that and put it on internet for everybody to see. So misconfiguration errors, but they are going down. This is very disappointing. And the biggest part, that no matter how mathematically wise and clever and savvy you are, how much technology you have, how much you invest in hiring people to secure your business, your university, your home. Biggest problem, look, 82% involved human element. Human who was socially engineered. No, somebody who
nothing there
credit card number, somebody who gives you
to do.
information.
Just turn it in.
Somebody who. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yes.
There was a point where it was on. So 82% is people, human element, not technology element, human element. You know how many times we've seen, you know, you're entering a building, somebody comes tailgating you. So, oh, sorry, can't, you know, we are all polite, right? I mean, we want to hold the door. Even in places where you know you have to use your card to enter. And still somebody's coming, somebody was smoking outside and they're just jumping in. Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot my key in my office. Can I get in? You know, I just came out for a smoke break. And they say, yeah, sure, come on, go ahead. You know, you don't say, show me your card. No, you can't. Show me your card first. You know, and this exactly is the type of thing that happens either in physical encounters or technological encounters through phishing mails or similar situation. But 82%. So I think probably this will be in the last few minutes, the thing that we can do, and that will take us to the beginning of the AI that we can either continue or just leave it at that. Now, trade. So what is the problem there? More and more countries getting suspicious of other countries using their digital products, electronic products, to spy on them, okay? That's basically the idea. So I don't want you to spy on me. You don't want me to spy on you. So what we're going to do is we're going to pay extra attention, higher scrutiny to the products that we are exchanging as part of our trade agreements. Not like what we had before. It's going to be really scrutinized all the way down. And there are lots of then risks that are involved for the company that may not count on that scrutiny before they create the product or invest in the product. And all of a sudden they find that, you know, the whole international community is banning their product. So here's an example of Germany, which generally is, of course, a friendly country to the United States, and they have done lots of spying together. But Germany banned the sale and ownership even of my friend Taylor.
I get the news every day.
50 centimeter long doll, roughly, that basically they said that it concealed surveillance device. Okay, which goes against German privacy regulations. So you can't own, you can't sell, you can sell it, you can own it. I'm sure you have heard about this, you know, Huawei's 5G equipment, lots of concerns. United States banned it, a couple of countries followed, United States banned it, a couple of countries said, no, we don't see any problems with that, we don't see any risks in that, not significant risks at least. So we're gonna go with that because it's more economical. Then there are examples like Crypto AG, a Swiss company, manufacturer of encryption devices that was actually purchased secretly in 70s for, I don't know, $6 million, jointly by CIA and BND. BND is, let's say, the CIA of Germany, right? And was owned even by them jointly until 90s, and then the sole owner was CIA until 2018. So obviously, people have difficult time trusting that then the company is being owned by government's central intelligence agents. So finally, the solutions then, what are the proposed solutions in the literature to fight against this kind of problems, that issues that we have? And there's like three categories essentially. One, governments should have the capability of managing cybersecurity risks. Nobody can deny that. This is ultimately government needs to have some way of managing cybersecurity risks that may come as a result of an international trade and product being exchanged between countries. And that can be in many different ways. Laws and policies, regulations, sector-specific agencies to be created to study the implications of that, and training, education, all sorts of things put the burden on countries in order to do this kind of investigations. How much trust is there between governments and businesses? That is, government of this country, business of some other country, government of this country, business of this same country. How much trust is between those private, let's say, and public government agencies in terms of product creation or other surveillance mechanisms that can be built into them. And finally, geopolitics. This is one of the important things, and not all these things are always and solely because of the cybersecurity risks that they pose, but their politics also plays a role. As you can see, Huawei example is a good example that was banned immediately, US, Japan, Australia, but UK took its time and after a while only banned the new equipment. Germany was okay in a balanced way, so to, like some and here, some there, and Switzerland was completely okay, saying that there was no significant risk whatsoever. So is there a risk or isn't there a risk? I mean, there should be something simple and easy to detect. I mean, this is technological matter as opposed to political matter. But politics plays a huge role in addition to any sort of technology and technological investigation. So I think we are at 1:45 exactly, and I will stop here because the other sections will take us way beyond our allotted time. But if you have any questions, anything else, we can always go back to the topics of our local experience at IU and the AI and cybersecurity interaction and future. So I will, maybe I won't stop sharing, because if you have any questions that relate to one of those slides, I want to be able to go back and forth, but I will stop talking. So if you have any questions, please.
Oh, wow, this is a very important topic. You guys know this is a very hot topic in the age that we live. We thank you so much, Dr. Esfandiar, for sharing with us. And then we're very glad that you are using this platform. And then we say kudos to Dr. Raj, Professor Raj, who's inviting you, and all the people, because we learn a lot from your topic, and then we will continue to ask questions and ask other people to ask you questions. And
Perfect.
we ask everybody to open their, they can unmute now and ask any question they have, and I will be more than happy to close in the future.
Okay, thank you.
If you have any questions, feel free to ask now.
This is Franklin. I just wanted to know, is it, well, in terms of cybersecurity, is in the purview of the government or the private sector? Now, when it comes down to the use of so-called cyber war, we see that the government is directly involved in that. So to what extent do you really involve the government and then the private sector as far as cybersecurity is concerned?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. That has been a puzzle, believe me, for everybody, for the policy experts, for technical people like myself even, and for government people. It is not even in their language what constitutes an attack or what constitutes a cyber attack or can be called an attack already is a huge debate that they keep talking about. So therefore, they want to limit their role. My impression is that government, at least in this country, this is not true, of course, for the whole world, but in this country, government wants to limit its role in interfering with companies, with private sector, in protecting the companies or private sector against cyber attacks even, unless there is either an act which can be actually labeled as an attack. So therefore, it makes it possible for the military to go back and attack them in whatever way they see fit, whether it is cyber or otherwise. Or they act on information sharing with intelligence community. So more and more companies are willing now to share, and they wouldn't like that, to share information about their attacks, like Amazon or Microsoft and other places, with the government, in the hopes that this information sharing will lead to some action on government part, which is in some form indirect. So they won't say, because Sony shared information with us about North Korean, possibly North Korean attributed attack, we are now going to attack North Korea. Not like that, but more like, okay, we have this information from Sony that this happened, and so now we know what we are going to do in our arsenal of all the options that we have, what things we have to be careful about, what things we have to penetrate without knowing and letting anybody know, in this form of information sharing, strengthening each other. But the official position has been that government only deals with, as you said, with cyber war, information war, and any attack, any act that can be labeled as an attack. And for example, Obama administration refrained from calling the North Korean cyber attack on Sony an attack, because they said, if we call it an attack, how are you going to respond to that attack? So this is an attack on America. So what are you going to do? Nothing? Right? That is much worse. So then you say, okay, so like it's not an attack, it's vandalism. It's a cyber vandalism, they called it. Simply because, whereas it wasn't, like there was a lot of loss of money, a lot of loss of many reputation, other things. And it is not an easy question. You ask final part of your question, like what I think should be the role. I think sort of intermediate, balanced way of protecting companies to some degree and not interfering in the spirit of liberal democracy and liberal economy, not interfering too much with controls on private sector, but yet carrying some responsibility in defending your companies is a good place to be. And perhaps we will be moving in that direction now that NSA and other agencies are talking to companies much more and more productively, but who knows?
Thank you very much.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank you.
Any more questions, please? Please feel free to open your mic and ask any question.
Hi, I have sort of an amateur question as somebody that's interested in globalization. When we hear about attacks that were perpetrated by somebody in Eastern Europe or something from wherever, how is it that we're able, or that experts like you are able to ascertain where certain attacks might have come from, given how easy it is to spoof IP addresses and, you know, fake your location? I'm just curious. I've always been curious about that. So I'd love to hear your answer on that.
That's a wonderful question. That's one of the biggest problems. That is one of the biggest problems. Just yesterday, I was in a meeting with some people from US Cyber Command and NSA. And this question came up from the audience the same way that you're asking the question, attribution problem. Attribution is one of the biggest, most challenging problems in this whole arena of cyber, if you like, warfare or cyber activities. It is extremely difficult to know who did what and who made them do that. So even if, and they say, and it's everybody knows that it takes a long, long time to get to a point where you can do a so-called, what they call in Cyber Command, technical attribution. So you can be sure that in terms of networks, in terms of IP addresses, in terms of behavioral patterns, signatures, the type of malware used, the particular naming of the malware that is used, the particular naming of sometimes even variables in the code that has been used, that this seems to be the behavior that we expect from Grizzly Bear, or we expect from Funny Bear, or whatever, Fancy Bear, you know, some Russian group, or this is more North Korean group. This is in their kind of behavior style. And again, this is not final. Plus, even if you establish that, you won't be able to make sure to say that these people will actually working with the government or for the government of China or Russia. Maybe they did it on their own. You know, maybe they did it because they wanted to do it and nobody, even the government, is responsible. How can you attribute it to them? So they have now created, both in international law and in the world of military, they have created this whole idea of different kinds of attribution, you know, like political attribution. So this is in political, you have the motive to do this. Who else has the motivation to do meddling in the US elections? Okay, there are only few. who have the means and who have the motive and who are capable and who will not shy away from doing that. So therefore, it's very likely that I can politically attribute this to you, or that there is legal attribution, or that there is technical attribution. But to add, so the short answer to your question is, none of us are certain. It is just a matter of signatures that you see, both behavioral and technical, that you with high probability think, and resources required. How many people could do Stuxnet? How many people can use the Emotet video that I put there? If you watch it, it's unbelievably complicated. How many people will have the means, access to that many zero-day vulnerabilities? So how many, if somebody hacked iPhones and did something through that, an iPhone zero-day vulnerability probably has a price of a minimum of $100,000 in the black market. So who can really go and buy 4 of those or 3 of those and then implement all of those, put them together, make sure that it spreads? I mean, there are few actors, you know, like how in other things it is, like in real life, you say, oh, well, this crime, you can't, like, this is not the amateur job. Amateurs cannot do something like this. This must have been some organized group of people with like lots of money who could buy all these cars and guns and automatic weapons and things. It's more like that than saying, I know for 100% sure this came from there.
All right, Doctor, I was follow you with a lot of attention, and like I said before, I learned a lot. I have a very interesting question for you from what's going on in the world right now with Russia and Ukraine. What impact do you think the different cyber attack on Russia will make on other nations from geopolitics standpoint?
You mean the geopolitics in the world or the region, or?
I will mean in the world and also the regions.
Yeah, you know, I think it is really, again, it's very difficult to know. Another difficulty, in addition to attribution challenge, is the implication challenge of what can happen if I did this. You know, if I, for example, interfered with the Russian satellites, if I interfered with Russian infrastructure, power grid and things like that, will they be able to interfere with my power grid or some of my allies, or do something not quite equal in kind? So attack, because according to their, for example, warfare doctrine, it may be any attack of any sort warrants any response of any sort. So then I can respond with guns as opposed to malware. So it is very difficult to know, simply because people never reveal their hand. Nobody knows, well, at least people like us, we don't know, and maybe agencies know, but people like we don't know really how much capability there is that Russians have. How many of these dormant malware systems are there in the American power grid in, you know, East Coast? Or nuclear reactors? Do they have things? Maybe they have things that has been there for like years, and they are waiting for the right moment to activate. You don't know. We don't know. And some of these people discover and find out that they have been there for many years, but they didn't do anything. They were just collecting data, but they could have done things, but they didn't. Again, maybe they feared that there will be a retaliation of the guy. So it is not at all clear. That is why I feel like people don't talk about this. Even if they do things, they don't advertise what they are doing. They simply say, you know, there have been activities that we are countering some of their attacks. Nobody says we are going to attack in this form or that form, and nobody will ever say that. So it is hard to know, really. It's very difficult to know how it will change the dynamics of the war there between Russia and Ukraine, if they wanted to retaliate in that form, or how it will change it with NATO, how it will change it with, is it a declaration of war? Again, as I said, like the Korean attack on US was not called an attack, because then you have to declare war on the country, or at least counter the attack. So maybe Russia will do that, maybe Russia won't do that. Maybe you do a simple thing and they will say this is the act of war. Nobody really knows, because there is no law. I mean, people keep saying international law applies, But then you say, okay, international applies, but who is responsible for this? We don't know. So then we cannot do anything. Okay. So then, or we do know, but we cannot go beyond this because arms were not involved. This is below the threshold of armed conflict. So we can't really invoke this other thing. So it's very complicated and very confusing. And nobody knows how to deal with this. And nobody knows how to deter this. It's not even like nuclear bomb, where you say, hey, I have a nuclear bomb. If you use your nuclear bomb, I'm going to use my nuclear bomb. So we never use our nuclear bomb. It's not like that because nobody says what they have. Nobody says, I have this virus that if I unleash on your system, you're going to be in dark for 6 months. Nobody ever say that. Yeah. So things are really different and very difficult.
So I know other people need to ask questions, but there is something pop up in my mind. And will you agree that there is a bigger war, like when we have these cyber attacks on Russia, instead of like nuclear war or gun war? Do you think like it's bigger, the cyber attack is bigger than what we see on the TV?
Well, this things that are maybe secret, I don't know. The impact of cyber attacks, people still believe that even though many people use cyber Pearl Harbor terminology and phrases like that, it is in the mind of many people, cyber attacks are still not at a point where they can even be remotely compared in terms of their impact with actual physical, what military calls kinetic battle. So it is nowhere comparable the damage, it is nowhere comparable the financial or human life damage and loss. Yes, you can have a cyber attack that maybe goes to the hospital and kills patients because they couldn't be monitored, surgical crew were disabled, everything was not okay. Yes, but in one bomb can kill 10 times that, one simple bomb can kill. So there is still in military and other places and even military policymakers this belief that cyber attacks are way too far away at this point from anything comparable to real kinetic attacks and wars. So you have to prevent them, you have to go against them, of course. There will be more and more financial damage coming from them. For example, ransomware is going to lead to more problems, many more problems in terms of money and maybe human life loss as well. But the focus is really more. If there is an actual war going on somewhere, cyber plays a very minor role, at least in media and the visible part of the public world. And I don't believe even in the private sense or in a very secretive sense, cyber attacks or unless, for example, like if you were able to hack and disable defense rocket mechanism, yes. So you have made a great contribution. But if you disable some bank site, or if you steal some credentials of some general, or these won't be in a comparable level in this game when there is a real fight going on. I see that there is on the chat some question about from Peggy Wolf about ransomware and how to protect against ransomware. Well, it is really the best protection is always, well, as they said, the joke is the best way to protect your computer is to unplug it from the, so given that you're not going to unplug your computer, so if your computer stays plugged to the wall and that you're connected to internet, there are a couple of things that you can do. Normally, what you want to avoid is you want to avoid malware that causes the payload of the form of a ransomware from getting to your computer. You want to avoid that. So do not open messages that you do not trust. When somebody sends you an email and saying, this is your invoice, you need to pay this right now, or you're going to be prosecuted, you have this debt, your bank is frozen, your account is frozen, any sort of threatening language, any sort of promising language. If you click here, you may enter to win $100 gift card from Amazon. believable. Nobody will say 100,000. They will say, click here to win $50 thing. Click here to win gift card for this restaurant. Very simple. And do not click on anything like that. Do not. If somebody sends you a link, go to a new page, look at the link separately, look at the header of the email to see if the email has some unusual things, even if it comes from your business, from your institution. Did they use org instead of edu? Did they use com instead of org? Did they put another L in the letters that use L, or any changes that will be suspicious? Pay attention to those. If you can create another account on your laptop with less kind of an access and more limited permissions, and use that when you're working on your PC or on your laptop, create another user like Peggy 2, and then Peggy 2 cannot access certain things, like disable many things that normally, if you own the device, you have the administrator role. You can download anything you want. You can install anything you want, but create another user with none of those capabilities. So work with that, unless at a time when you want to download something and install something. Because if somebody takes over your account and your credentials, they have full authority and privilege on your machine, because you do. So therefore, they can do whatever they want with your machine. Whereas if you limit yourself to another user that you limit, then if they steal that one, because most of the time you will be working with that more limited account, they won't be able to do most of the things that otherwise they can do. So it is only protection by being clever and not being a victim of phishing or spam, anything like that. Having better filters, turn on your firewall, definitely turn on your firewall, make it even more restrictive and asking you for permission. Have updates of the antivirus, all sorts of protective software that you have. Continuously pay attention to updates, update them regularly. When Windows or Mac or anybody else, whatever your operating system is, sends you an update, don't delay it. Don't say tomorrow, remind me later, remind me next week. No, that same minute when it is available, just download, upgrade, turn it on, turn it off, restart. It is much better to take the inconvenience of restarting your computer than it is to leave a vulnerability unpatched because you did not update to the newest version, which had the patch for that. And then you have no idea how many people are still getting rich by exploiting Windows 95 vulnerabilities. So you have no idea how many people are still using Windows 95 without any upgrades. So.
All right, thank you so much. We do hope we have more people to have questions before we take a break. If you have any questions, feel free to ask it. We will take a break and then we'll be back. Please ask before we will go to the break. All right, once more again, Dr. Esfandiar, thank you so much for putting some time away to share your knowledge with us. We in depth for what you did for us today. We learned so much thing, and then we believe that we prepare now to make sure we can unplug our computer and stay away from the malware, the runs, yes, and all the spams. Thank you for your advice.
You're very welcome, and thank you everyone for being there and for listening.
Yes.
Attention. Please, I mean, I'm sure my email is there on that document, and I will be sending the slides to Raj and Fiza, and you can find those, and you can ask me any questions anytime, anyone.
All right. Prevent, detect, respond, and recovery. Thank you again for sharing that.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Now we're going to a break. We'll be back at 2:30. We will be back at 2:30. Thank you so much for all of you. Please, come back.